What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well, and as usual, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to click here on another video where we're going to be talking about a brand new film I got to check out a little bit early, and that film is called A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey. Directed by Kogonada, this film stars people like Margot Robbie, Colin Farrell, Kline, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and more. So over the course of the last few months, I saw the trailer for this film quite a few times, and every time I saw it, it looked like a movie that could go either way for me, but looked for like a movie that more than anything was going to have some charm. And I've always been a big fan of Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie, so you put the two of them at the center of this surrealistic romantic comedy of sorts with these dramatic elements, and you've at least piqued my interest. So with all that, let's get into what this film is all about, and then we'll get into my thoughts on the film. The film focuses on Sarah and David, who are strangers who meet at a mutual friend's wedding, and through a magical and fantastical twist, they are led to walk through special doorways that allow them to revisit defining moments from their past. As they relive these memories, they both gain insight into how their past shaped their present and possibly how they might shape their future. The journey is emotional, whimsical, and grounded in themes of love, loss, regret, and second chances. And I'm happy to start this off by saying I enjoyed A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, which is a big title. This is definitely a mouthful of a title that I probably won't say too many times here in this review, but overall I can say I enjoyed this film. This isn't a film I loved all around, but it is a film that certainly has elements to love, and is a film more than anything that I admire. It's a very ambitious film that has big ideas, and I don't know that it's necessarily going to land for everybody, but I walked out of the film having had a positive experience despite some gripes. And we'll get into those gripes and my thoughts on the overall story and the filmmaking in just a moment, but I do want to start off with my positives, which honestly is majority when it comes down to the cast and the filmmaking. The film takes place in a surrealistic, heightened reality. Immediately, the film asks you as a viewer to suspend your disbelief. And not necessarily in the way of saying, hey, this is a film that has magic, or this is the kind of film that has fantasy elements or sci-fi elements, where you're going to have to kind of tell yourself, okay, that's the realm we're in. This is a film that doesn't immediately or ever really explain to you fully what's going on. As that synopsis read, over the course of the film, you have these two characters that are going through magical doorways of sorts that are taking them back to past moments in their lives, oftentimes reliving moments that they've already gone through, and it's up to them on whether or not they're going to make the same mistakes or maybe change those moments, as well as also having moments that they actually didn't get to live, or seeing moments in their life from a different perspective, or being able to experience something from the perspective of another person that was actually in a memory with them. It's a really interesting concept, and it does some really cool and interesting things with that. And at a lot of times you have the characters who are kind of admiring and also acknowledging the absurdity of what's going on, acknowledging the weirdness of what they're experiencing alongside the audience who's also seeing these things happening and wondering what's going on. Are we in some sort of other dimension, some other realm? Is there something causing this magical journey to happen? And the film never really gives you any answers. This is a film that just solely asks you to go on this whimsical adventure and not really worry about the semantics of how it all makes sense and what kind of world or realm we're in, but instead just go on the emotional beats with these characters. And so when it really leans into those emotional beats, when it really leans into the themes that this film is about, it's actually a really solid film that's incredibly touching, has a lot of heart, and more than anything, is ambitious. It's the kind of film that you can look at as a fan of film and think, yeah, there's not a whole lot of romantic comedy dramas that are specifically like this. Maybe there's plenty that have dipped their toes into fantastical elements or things that are kind of ambiguous and kind of like take you on this more mystical, whimsical journey. But I think in the case of A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, you have something very unique in the way that its story is told. With all that said, I think a lot of what really works in this film is thanks to our cast, specifically the two main leads, Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell, who are absolutely why this film works in every conceivable way. The filmmaking in terms of cinematography and the sound design and the overall lighting of the film, the sets that are used, and the backgrounds all definitely add to the surrealistic vibe that the film is giving off, and I think is a huge reason for why this film works. But a lot of the emotional beats, a lot of the charm of this film, a lot of the chemistry is 100% because Colin Farrell and Margot Robbie are two incredible actors who are able to give off incredibly likable, but also being able to give off very kind of complex characters. You have two characters immediately that when you first meet them seemed like tortured souls to an extent, but they're charming, they're funny, they're likable, they both have very nice smiles, very warm eyes. And over the course of the film, as we get to relive these moments from their past, while some of them are a little bit more funny or a little bit more fun, there are some of them that, as the film gets deeper into the film, starts to explore some darker sides of their lives, some things that they regret, or some hardship that they've faced, some loss in their life that kind of led them to who they are today, and has led to them being these two people who are seeking validation in the wrong places, or seeking something to kind of fill a void within them, only for them to discard what it was that was filling that void with something else to fill the void in a different way. The film tackles a lot of things when it comes down to themes. It tackles things like love and loss, but it also tackles the idea of being open to the journey life will take you on, and how more often than not, if you are willing to be open to the good and to the bad, and live in a mindset of being content within the world that you're currently in, that you'll start to find yourself in a place of being able to enjoy life more and find more happiness as life goes on. And those are the moments where this film really works. It does have nice messages. It's really well acted. It's very well made. And it lives in this weird, ambiguous, heightened reality that I couldn't help but be intrigued by. And so I think when it comes down to the core of this film, the emotional beats of this film, I think a lot of that stuff really works because of the cast, because of the filmmaking, and because of the weird world and unique storytelling that this film allows you to go on. With all that said, despite all those positives, I struggled a little bit with this film because I do think that there are elements about how the film picks up that just felt rushed to me. I think the chemistry between these two actors is great, but it felt like our two characters find themselves connected a little bit too early, just to kind of get us propelled into this adventure. And eventually you find yourself in a place of really caring for these characters, caring for these moments, finding yourself caring for these emotional beats between the characters. But it's undeniable that it feels like we were kind of launched into that a little bit more quickly than I would have liked, in a way that almost kind of feels just kind of rushed and not so believable, really, in a lot of ways. And it made some of the moments between the characters maybe not feel as impactful in the earlier part of the film, simply because the movie moves at such a rapid pace to get things going. But like I mentioned before, the film does tackle some great themes. You have great actors here who do have great chemistry. So once the film really needs to lean into these great emotional beats, I think it really does that in a really solid way. And I think in the hands of lesser actors, it maybe wouldn't have been so strong, but it certainly still finds its footing. But undeniably, I do think the earlier part of this film suffers from just trying to get us places a little bit too quickly, especially as they start to get to some of the connection between the characters. It just feels like it's hard to believe that these two characters that met at a wedding would be so kind of enamored with each other so quickly, in the way that the script is kind of having certain lines of dialogue showcase their connection. With that said as well, as I mentioned earlier, this is a film that leaves things ambiguous. It doesn't ever really fully explain what it is that's going on. Is this adventure in their head? Is it a metaphor more so than something that they're actually experiencing? Is it something that they're actually experiencing, and how does it make sense? Is this world magical? There are elements of this film that just flat out are never answered, and I think depending on who you are and what your taste is in film and what you want from a story, you may watch this and struggle with the lack of answers and wonder what kind of reality this film sits in. I'm somebody who loves all sorts of weird, fantastical things, so I'm totally okay with the notion of suspending my disbelief for a film and a story that's taking us somewhere else. But in the case of this film, because it never really gives you a clear-cut answer as to why anything is happening, it does just kind of feel like a, hey, trust me, bro, go along for the journey. And when I did go along for the journey, those moments did work on an emotional level, but there was something missing for me. By the time the movie was over, between the rushed beginning and the lack of answers as to what's really going on, and this heightened reality that is cool, but again, very underexplained, I just found myself disconnected from the characters ever so slightly by the time that we got to the end of it. And even though there are some really interesting emotional beats and some themes I really enjoyed, by the time we got to the end, it did feel like there was just something missing. There was something missing from connecting me to these characters on a deeper level, and it ultimately started to fall into fairly predictable, where you can see where the film is going, pretty early on in the film, and it pretty much goes in that direction despite the really strong moments throughout and really strong scenes that are able to expand upon our characters in really cool ways. All in all, I think A Big Bold Beautiful Journey is an incredibly well made film in terms of visuals and sound. I think it's a really interesting film in the way that it chooses to tell a story, and I think our two main leads are incredible. They give off great sex appeal, great chemistry, great charm. They have warm eyes, beautiful smiles, and they're really able to pull you into this romance. And there was actually an element of this film that in a lot of ways felt to me like it maybe would have worked better on the stage. From what I was reading online, this was a script that was kind of just in development or just sitting somewhere like as a really well-made script that just hadn't been made yet. And eventually they decided to kind of get the ball rolling. But the movie feels in a lot of ways, and I think intentionally, like a stage play. And I could see this almost working even more so as a stage play, where that suspension of disbelief is a little bit different when you're watching it on a stage versus watching it in a film. That part of me that wanted just a little bit more answers didn't really feel fed by the time the film was over, and I think the predictability of it ultimately kind of held it back from me being anything more than a really nice, very cute, charming, thematically heavy romance film with a whimsical element to it that just never really felt overly explained and a rushed beginning. But still, with all those gripes, there's a lot of positives of this film. I think there's a lot to love here. I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy this film, but I can see some people walking out of it and thinking that it's a little too predictable and that they kind of don't fully ever explore elements of the film that are some of the most interesting parts of the film that are going to leave you wondering what the film really was in a lot of ways. Where does it live? What is it trying to be? And I think that some people are also going to hear me say this and think, you know, I didn't even care about any of that. I just liked going on the journey with the characters because the whole premise of the film is to be open to the journey of life. So why not be open to the journey this film takes you on? And I do think that that's a valid takeaway as well. I try to always have my own opinion on a film, but try to see things from different perspectives. And so I do think this is the kind of film that is going to work for some and not work for others. But ultimately, I walked away from it pretty positive, thinking this was a pretty solid time. Not one I loved, but there's certainly a lot to love about it. So that's going to be my thoughts on A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, and I can't wait to hear from you guys down below. Are you planning on checking this out? And if you've already seen it and that's what brought you to this review, leave some comments. Where did you kind of land on this film? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you wish they explained more? Or do you think that ambiguity of the film is part of what makes the film good? I'm definitely looking forward to the different opinions on it, so definitely hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.